Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks, where kindred souls gather to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as a February room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for Composite Development's fly rods and fishing accessories. Tech, precision, ingenuity, legacy. Go to cdfishing.us and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's your host, Lauren Carnop, and this is the February Room.
Welcome to the February Room. Today I have a great guest. He's the World Dominator Coordinator over at Blackfoot River Outfitters, Matthew Churchman. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you about it.
And I know we have an amazing fishing story that you'll be sharing with me. But before we get into that story, I want to know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Kansas, the Kansas City area. So I grew up in that area and kind of came to fishing as just, I guess, what we'd call conventional fishing, just spin fishing and lake fishing for crappie and bass and catfish and that kind of stuff. But then also developed an interest in fly fishing. My great-grandfather had some old fly rods with the automatic reels down in his basement at his lake house. And so I was very interested in that and kind of like to get those out and cast those. And that just kind of evolved over time until that was the only thing I was doing. And so, yeah, that's kind of, where I came from fishing-wise. And then my wife and I always liked to travel out west and, fishing was always involved in that. But, about 15 years ago, she's the more marketable of the two of us by a long shot. So she was able to find an advertising position that was in Missoula. And I hadn't been here, but I could read a map and see that this would be a good place to be. So we headed out this way about 15 years ago.
And then how did you get involved with Blackfoot River Outfitters?
Yeah, so when my wife was out here, she was already making a lot of new friends, and then meeting their friends as well through work. And she called me one day. I was working on a fisheries research project as a technician in Arkansas on those tailwaters down there that have those huge brown trout. In them, some of the last several world records are from down there. So it was an interesting, cool place to work. But anyway, she called me and said, "Hey, I've met some people up here that might be able to give you a job." She said, one of them owns a fly fishing business and the other one is the head of the soccer, youth soccer program here, as I'd played soccer in college. And so she's like already doing my networking for me ahead of time.
She sounds like a great woman.
Yeah, well, and one that wanted me to have a job probably too. So it's not entirely self-interested, but yeah, that was great. And so then I actually came out and was out at the depot for my birthday. And one of their friends happened to share my birthday, so they were out for theirs. And then we made the connection that we had mutual friends and started talking. And they were just getting ready to open their fly shop up in Phillipsburg, Flint Creek Outdoors, and they were looking for somebody to run it. So we started chatting about that, and I was pretty excited at that prospect. So I went home and found out their address and sent them a resume. And I don't even think they read the resume. They were just really impressed. I don't think anybody ever sent them a resume before, because they're used to, outfitting, guides will come and they'll, make connections. And just the fact that I, had a printer and the wherewithal to send them something, they were very impressed by that.
Well, especially nowadays, right? Nothing gets mailed anymore. It's
right,
always
yeah.
like, attach your link here. And
yeah,
so
very old school.
Well, now that we've got a little bit of background of who you are, you've had quite the most interesting 2020 year, not just with coronavirus, but your own fishing experience as well. And it's not maybe a lot of people, it's interesting because I always ask people on this podcast, have they ever had any like near encounters, very scary experiences on the river? And they're like, maybe here and there, but you actually get to say yes. And I'm really anxious to hear exactly what happened with you on that fateful day on the river.
So we were taking a little trip. In fact, we weren't originally scheduled to go on this this river trip with a couple of friends, and then also John and Terry, John Herzer and Terry Rogland, who were, in addition to being friends, are my employers, and the folks we were chatting about who I met out at the bar restaurant for my birthday. So we actually got a call the night before they were leaving. They were going to go do an overnight on a river. And, originally they had some other friends that were scheduled to go and kind of backed out. And we just were talking about something else. And they're like, well, you guys should come tomorrow on this river trip. And I'm kind of like, because in my head, then I'm like, okay, all the camping gear, I make sure, I got to, mess around with the boat and get all this stuff ready. And it's already, 7, 8 o'clock. And then we're going to get up early. And we kind of chatted back and forth, said, okay, let's do it. So we get all our stuff together, get up early the next morning, head over to the river. And it's a ways from our house. So we take a long drive. It's kind of out of our normal drainage where we fish. And so, we just make the road trip. And then we have the first day on the river, great fishing. The streamer fishing was really good. Wonderful day. And so get to camp. And I should say I'm with my wife and daughter are in my boat. My daughter's 9 years old. And then John and Terry are in another raft. And then our other friends are in another raft. And so we're just floating down fishing. Find a good place for camp and, pull over, kind of scan the area, because I will mention, not to foreshadow, that we are in grizzly country. So, just kind of looking around for any signs around camp, get a pretty good feeling about it. We're just on this we check the GPS, we're on state land. We kind of, these guys have been over there before, so they kind of, we're pretty sure about that, but we check and make sure that we're good to go. And we're also kind of below the high water mark. We're just right on the river. And so we go ahead and set up camp, do dinner. And John actually, I'd been rowing all day and my wife had been fishing. I didn't really fish hardly at all. And so he's not one to just sit around camp. So John says, well, let's get you fishing. You need to fish. And so he proceeds to row back up the river and have me fish. And I caught a couple of really nice browns, including a big 21-inch brown, which was super cool, just right across from camp. So he was great to do that. And so then we just go back over and then just lay down for the night in our tents. And then the next morning we get up and we do some coffee and breakfast. Nothing more than really heating up water as far as food. So just for some oatmeal or something. So not a big breakfast by any means. And then we just go into that. We're anxious to get on the river, right? The river's right there. It's kind of calling. We got about 12 more miles to float that day. So, and we're in kind of like this scrubby, willows and what's kind of a riparian zone. So the vegetation is pretty sparse. And then the hillsides are just grassy hillsides, open country. And so, at this point we've been in camp for about 16 hours from when we landed through the morning, starting to feel pretty comfortable, but we're still thinking about bears. We know where we are and that they're around. And we had about, I think, 7 cans is what we decided of bear spray in camp, just kind of all over the roll of tables, and some people have it on their hips. And then when I had rolled out of my tent, I was going to go take a leak. So I had just grabbed that little pile that you make by your head in your tent of your, sunglasses and headlamp and bear spray. So I grabbed that little pile, and I even remember setting it right outside the tent and saying, hey, Laura, here's this pot, the miscellaneous pile. And she came over and grabbed it and put it in the top of our dry box. And it's that time in camp where everybody's kind of quiet, you're not really talking. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing, rolling sleeping bags, rolling sleeping pads. Yeah, so just not any kind of conversation. So I go over into the kind of scrubby willows, and I'm just kind of looking around, and I, kind of look back towards the river, which is behind me. and then I catch something brown out of the corner of my eye, and then I pull my head up and I see that and I instantly recognize it as a grizzly bear. First thing is grizzly bear in my head. And it's, they walked it off later, and it was 12 yards from where I was. So somehow the two of us had managed to not see each other, which I still don't know how that happened. And it at this point had walked by me, head down. And when I say walk by me, it's 12 yards away, kind of, I'm looking at it, and it's going kind of towards camp, back upstream. I'd been kind of looking downstream, so then I turned my head to kind of be facing it. And it has no idea that I'm there. So I start backing up slowly and quietly. And so then what happens in your brain, apparently, is I started thinking kind of in paragraphs, what to do in this situation. And I will say that all the things you're supposed to do it came back to me, instantly. And I knew the major thing that I think about to this day is how loud to be was going to be very, very important. I've worked for the BLM and done bear safety training, over days of classes for both firearms and, watching videos and talking about how to handle that situation. And then worked in Alaska, carrying a shotgun down to the fish weir every day. So I've been in these situations or had some training, I guess I should say. So I just knew that shouting, it would probably be bad, because I would, run the risk of startling the bear. But I also knew that it was walking towards camp, and that's where my 9-year-old and my wife and my friends were. So in those, as my head's spinning what to do, I just decided to yell bear. There was actually 2 bears. So at about a split second before I had yelled bear, Terry had turned towards camp. That's my boss and friend. She had turned towards camp and said bear, kind of semi, in a louder voice, bear. And that bear had kind of skittered off. It was kind of walking away from her when she said it, whereas my bear was walking kind of towards her position, really. And so I didn't hear her. I don't know if it was just so close together, or if my brain was just so focused on something else. But the people in camp heard bear, bear, and with the second bear being loud, yell being louder. As soon as I did that, and I knew that this was one of the results of maybe being too loud, as soon as I yelled bear, it just turned right on me and just made like a big guttural, kind of like a woof. And I remember that instant, and then I remember it's coming. And then my mind said, stand your ground, put your hands straight up over your head. In my mind, I had done that, but on the later retelling from John, who we'll get to in a second, he saw the entire encounter. He said my hands only had time to make it from about my chest height to my chin, how fast it was able to cover that short distance. And so John was just looking downstream, and he saw the entire encounter. So he saw, he heard me, spun his head, looking right at me, sees the thing come, sees me raise my hands just to, be able to basically move them in the time it takes it. And the bear just hammered me. And he said it was like kind of at a 45-degree angle, just paws out and hits me. And one of my shoes came off. Now, my shoes were just slipped on, so it wasn't like the kind of force that, that ripped off an untied shoe. But at the same time, it just hit me that hard. And he said I landed about 8 feet from where my shoe was, so almost back to the river. So by this time, I'm almost right on the riverbank. And then my brain just said, get on your stomach, cover your head. Now, whether I was able to effectuate that or not, that is how I ended up. So I was on my stomach with my arms over the back of my head. And the thing was just thrashing, to hear John's telling. It was just like the whole back of it, its whole back was just like shaking with movement, paws in and out, just kind of swiping at me. And it was biting down my left side. To me, it was just like being in like a big, hairy washing machine. The one thing that really worried me is then I felt it kind of get my stomach. I guess the claws coming, in, were able to kind of get into my stomach. And that's kind of where the worst of my injuries were these kind of big, long gashes on my stomach just from the claws going in and out. And then I could hear my friend John Herzer. He's like, oh, okay, the bear spray is, this many feet behind me in a pile in front of his raft, getting ready to be loaded because we were just supposed to be on our way. And then he saw what was happening to me, and he thought, I just got to go. So he just came charging at the bear. And while I was laying on the ground, I could hear him coming, cussing and running, just this loud yell. And I could hear other people in camp start to yell. Nobody else had really calculated what was happening. Like I couldn't really be seen underneath the bear. It was just this, crazy thing going on. Terry thought maybe it was we did have 4 dogs in camp, none of whom even knew this happened at all. So John's running at the bear while it's kind of biting down my side, just kind of doing all this stuff. And then I can hear him coming. And he said, this is later telling. I didn't see him for a few days after, but he said the bear stopped for a second, looked up at him, and just had this really frightening, look on its face, and then went back to doing what it was doing. He just kept running at it, just barehanded, not knowing it's necessarily he's calculating, what am I going to do? He's looking for something to pick up. And he said, 2 things happened in his brain. He was like, number one, where's my posse? He just kept thinking there'd be all these dogs and all these people running with it, he's just like, God, where is it? Where are these dogs? And then he thought, okay, time to share the pain. He's like, it's going to come after, it's going to get off of me, come after him. When he gets there, he thought maybe he'd jump on its back, was the only thing he settled on. But all that being said, but before he was able to get there, luckily it just did these series of spins, these just rapid spins. I don't know if it was one or probably, I think the way he described it, maybe these 2 big spins. I don't know if it's assessing, how to remove itself from the situation, just kind of spin and out of there. And all of this thing in my long telling of it is what, between 10 and 15 seconds. My guess is it's closer to 10 seconds, the whole thing. But just, very violent and rapid, and then it's over. So John comes over. He thinks I'm going to be dead. In a lot of ways, he's a lot more traumatized by this than me because he saw it. I was obviously intimately involved, but I was kind of underneath the bear. And in a lot of ways, I think your brain kind of protects you from a lot of it. You just kind of this drum of adrenaline and shock. But John saw the whole thing happen, and he's thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to have to go tell, his wife and daughter that he's dead. Just from the sheer violence of what he had seen. So he comes over thinking that that's going to be the case, and puts his hand on my back, and it's moving up and down. He's like, okay, well, he's alive. And he's like, oh, okay, well, now he's going to be missing an eyeball, or, what do we got here? Also, he's got, by then they've got bear spray. Our other friend comes over. He's on the other side of me. He's got his bear spray, and he's kind of got his head on a swivel. Like his job is looking around, and they're both telling me, hey, we got to check you out here. You got to roll over. And I said, I don't want to roll over. I'm afraid I'm going to spill out. Because I remember that it had gotten my stomach, and I felt, I was still in this kind of crouched up position with my, by this time I'd let my hands drop beside my face from off of my head. And there was a huge pool of blood under my face, but it was bleeding a lot. And I guess I said that same thing 3 times. I said, I'm afraid I'm going to spill out if I roll over. And they said, well, we got to see what we're dealing with. Let's roll you over. So they roll me over, and there's some big gashes there, long lacerations, but John, being a hunter, notices that it's just white stuff, and it's in the fat layer. So not through the muscle, which is good news. And he thought instantly, he's like, well, he's going to live. Like, we're going to be okay here. And they were saying that to me, like, we're going to be okay. I'm like, what do we got here? And I have some punctures on my right forearm from where it was over the top of my head. And I've got, it bit me all down my left side. So I had a big puncture on the back of my leg, some more bite punctures around my hip, and then some right under my arm. I broke 3 ribs where I'm assuming just from biting down, I broke 3 ribs, and then kind of up on my upper shoulders. So just kind of all this stuff down my left side, and then my stomach. So they're just kind of assessing the situation. So our other friend comes over, and she sits on my left shoulder, and she was just a total rock. And she had the first aid, and she's just pulling stuff out and putting pressure on everything, and they're getting a sleeping bag over me and getting me cleaned up, and meanwhile John's going back and forth and keeping Laura and Ella, my wife and daughter, keeping them over by camp and just kind of giving them updates and telling them I'm going to be okay. And she's making them promise that he's not lying. He's like, I'm not lying. He's going to be okay, but let us get him cleaned up. And so they're, cleaning my face and just getting all the blood and putting pressure on everything. And so our friend is telling them to, we tied up the dogs, so not to have them go out and bring bears in or anything. And everybody's got their bear spray and keeping our heads up. And then she tells John, John and our other friend are just so, they're such DIY kind of people that they're just figuring they're putting me in the raft and we're rowing out of there. We got 12 miles to do. He's already calculating in his head how long that's going to take. He's like, we'll take all the weight out of his boat and just me, and we'll just row and get out. But our friend says, why don't you run up on the hill and see if you can get a cell signal? And so he takes his bear spray and goes up on the hill up there and was able to get a signal. They had our location from his cell signal, and he said he could already hear people scrambling in the background, phones ringing, people moving around to get the Mercy Flight helicopter folks on the way. As I'm laying there, they're just kind of keeping me calm, and all that stuff's just starting to happen. And FWP's coming out, and they're going to head our way. They've got me cleaned up enough then that my daughter can come over and see me. She knows that Dad's been knocked down by a bear, but he's okay.
Was she pretty upset when she saw you? I'm crying right now. I feel like that would be such a hard thing as a wife and as a mother for my significant other to be that close to death.
Yeah. Yeah, so she was. I could tell she had been crying at that moment. She was, she had it together, and she could, then because she can see me and I'm talking, and she's like, okay, nobody's lying to me. He's going to be okay, which was great, to be able to have that conversation, and thank goodness for John. Again, I should say, talk about friendship and. Sorry.
No. Gosh, I've been I don't know. It's just really hard when you think of that life can just change so drastically like that. It makes me realize how I need to be a little bit better prepared for situations that, that can happen in an instant. So
yeah. And I think that's, initially I was like, a lot of people were trying to interview me while I was still kind of trying to recover, like from the newspapers, obviously they needed to do their story, and I was kind of staying away from that. But my thought now is like, if I can tell it and it pings in one person's brain, that like, oh gosh, it could be just that one instant, because I always like to think of myself as pretty bear aware, hunting up on the res and just always having out my hip and practice taking it out and trying to avoid the areas where I think it might be an issue. But, that being said, do I live up to that, my own ethic about that? And that's easier said than done, right? To have it on you at every step. And sometimes you think, oh, maybe you'll get some ridicule for, like, oh, look at bear spray guy. And I don't. I won't hear any of that, and nor should anyone else.
I mean, I have to say, I went camping, what was it, last week, and me and the girls, if I had to go to the bathroom, I have to be completely honest, I'm like, listening to you talk about this, I'm like, did I grab the bear spray with me? No, I was like, because you're right, you kind of get to this comfort where you're like, oh no, this is my camp spot, like, this is our little house here, but you're actually you're in their house, in their backyard.
Yeah. And the other thing is, and I know this, we spend a lot of time outside, is the habitat, the area we were in, just so open. The bear was actually walking on what was tantamount to a putting green. It was just, and I know bears live there but you just, still, and you're probably for, this is another good thing to learn, like, in your mind, I hunt up on the reservation, on the Flathead Reservation all the time for birds. And, you avoid the thick stuff because you think that's where the bears are going to be. And, the bears go wherever they want.
But back to it. So John is there, and so the helicopter, it came, and like, what happened? Like after, like, how did
Yeah.
you get out of there?
Yeah. So John kept running back up the hill and calling the dispatcher and saying, okay, where are we at? Because of, 45 minutes go, 30 minutes go by, 40, an hour goes by. And so he ran up there to make a call about, I think an hour and 15 minutes had gone by or something like that, maybe an hour. But he goes up and he says, okay, where are we at? I could be halfway to the bridge by now. He's thinking, I could be extracting him out of here right now. And just about then he sees FWP vehicles coming, and some guys from the local, emergency services. So the first wave of folks got there, including those Fish, Wildlife, and Parks guys. So there's shotguns everywhere, and that they start walking up, and a rancher who lived nearby had come with them. Just kind of, he gave them access across his property, and then the local EMT guys set to work on me, and they're helping me out. And they're doing their thing. And not too long after that, helicopter comes in, and lands on this tiny little spot of gravel right by the river. And these guys come over and start taking care of me, and they're just awesome. I mean, that's the other thing I want to say. Like, all these people were just the best. I mean, they just, calm, knew what they were doing. Mercy Flight guys in particular took really good care of Ella. They let her sit in the helicopter. They let her put on the headphones, like, helping her. And that's the other thing that all this kind of stuff reminds me of. I mean, just being surrounded by these great people, both, these folks you don't know, these folks, that I do know, that are taking such good care of me, and, charging a grizzly bear barehanded. That's the part that always chokes me up. That's the only time I really cry about this, is when I think about, like Johnny doing what he did, and it's just amazing. Yeah, so they get me loaded up on there, and, get me on some fentanyl, and just remember flying through the air to the hospital, just not too far away, and I got great care there, and I spent one night in the hospital. No one was able to come see me, so I got to kind of lay there and think about this whole thing a little bit. And because of COVID, no one could get into the hospital, so that was hard. And my wife and daughter, they just had to drive home and spend the night here without me. And then, but yeah, they got me, great doctors, and they got me. They did a lot of it. They just kind of leave open because they're punctures, and bears' mouths are obviously not a clean place to be. So they just kind of let the stuff, do its thing. And they just they stitched up my head really nice to where you can't hardly tell there's anything there anymore. Anything happened, and just put a few, I don't know if they're staple big stitches like across this big gash on my upper or lower chest, just to kind of hold it together. And but yeah, I mean, all in all, I mean, it's pretty incredible how the body heals. I mean, it's amazing. And the fact that that I'm doing as well as I am, because like I said, John, just like, he's still, I think he's over it a little bit now, but for a while he just couldn't really, what he saw, my injuries didn't match up with what he saw. I did end the trip with the biggest fish too. I want to get that on record. Because
21-inch brown.
Yeah, and nobody talks about that.
You're like, I think that we have to remember that I caught the biggest fish.
Right.
Actually, now everyone on the who listens to the podcast can know that you caught the biggest brown.
Thank you.
On your life. Was it the biggest brown of your life that you caught?
I think I've got a couple a little bit bigger than that, but this one, okay. This is the most memorable.
Yep, double brown. You got the double brown. Right. I don't know. Maybe just stick with one and not the other.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that also we talk about, like, you telling your story helps with also knowing about bear safety, but you're also doing something pretty else that's pretty incredible for a fundraiser with, is it Camp Make a Dream?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So that was just a thing. So we were going to do the Rat Pod, which was, ride around the Pioneers one day is kind of their fundraiser. for Can't Make a Dream. That's for kids that have gone through cancer treatment. They do cost-free camps with medical supervision for these kiddos. And so I just realized, I was getting a lot of inquiries because kind of everybody heard this news, right? And so it kind of spreads like wildfire. And I'm hearing from people. One of my most common things on my phone is, "Thank you so much. Who is this again?" Because not because I don't know the people, just because they may have not been in my phone for a while. I'm hearing from all kinds of people, which is wonderful. But then I kind of go radio silent, just, hey, this thing happened. My wife wrote a big thing on Facebook just to kind of, a little bit to take the pressure off of John and Terry from the retelling. Because I know that the retelling, especially just right after, was taking its toll. So I realized anyway that I needed to let everybody know. So it just so happened that we were supposed to be riding in Rat Pod to raise money for Can't Make a Dream. And so I just decided to, do a post and say, "Hey, ask me a grizzly bear question, and for a donation, I'll answer your question." Just kind of offhand and thinking, maybe we can raise, we're lucky we can raise $500 or something, maybe. And then the thing just went crazy. I said, "Hey, let's raise 500," and then instantly we were already over 500. So I said, "Okay, how about 1,000?" And then that was just by the wayside, and it just ended up raising $4,000 for Can't Make a Dream, which is great. Yeah.
Which is another positive thing that comes out of, a crazy, horrible story, but you also came some good of it also with raising money for that organization. Can people still donate to the organization, or is that has it been timed out? Okay.
Definitely. So not through my link that I had before, kind of for this particular event, which is their biggest fundraiser. But if you go to their website, there's a link to donate. And if someone wanted to do that, that'd be wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew, for sharing this story with me. And I think it's just so important as people who love to recreate that when you're recreating, you're actually recreating in somebody else's territory. And you shouldn't ever put your guards down, even if it feels like it's a perfect morning and everything's quiet and you're putting things away. Doesn't mean that there's other things around the corner that's doing the same thing, just rambling around.
You can get inert cans of bear spray. So it's the spray without any of the capsaicin, or if I'm saying that right, without any of the nastiness in it, the pepper. So you can get these cans and you can go try them out. So we had all the kids on the Smith River try a can. What does it do when you pull the trigger? How do you get the safety off? So you can play around with the can without the fear of spraying it in anyone's eyes. So we had all the kids come up, take the safety off, shoot the can, practice, shooting it kind of down at an angle towards the ground, just all these kind of things. So that's something people can do too. You can buy those cans and try it out. And I would recommend that.
Matthew, what's the best? I know you guys actually have some exciting news with Blackfoot River Outfitters. You guys have a new building that's going to be a new building that you're going to be. Yeah.
We're super excited. So, it's one thing to be, opening a new retail store in this environment, but it's going to be great going forward. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful space. I mean, we've showed it to a lot of these fishing reps, that go to fly shops all over the country, and they're kind of like, "Okay, great, another fly shop." But it's really interesting to have them walk in and then to see their face and then just wait and then pause for several seconds. And then there's usually some expletives involved, and just saying they haven't really seen anything like it, which is great, which is just what we were going for. So yeah, it's a new, much, much bigger space. We've way outgrown our space in Missoula, and I think it's going to be kind of a destination for people and a good hangout place. And yeah, it's really, really exciting.
Where what's the address of the new place?
So it's on the corner of North Russell and Montana. So for our local folks, it's going to be on the same street as Byron Brewery, and it's right across the street from the Pink Grizzly. So yeah, it's just fronted right up there on Russell, so you can't miss it. And we're on the north end of the building. That's the tall. It's we have the main floor and then a mezzanine, and there's 28-foot ceilings. And there's a deck on the outside of it looking north, and there's a basement that's 1.5 times the size of our current store. It's really really neat. So people definitely have to make a point to check it out. I don't think they'll be disappointed.
I know, like 2020, a lot of people say 2020 is like such a shit year, but I also think 2020 is also a year of reflection and learning about how to make a better of the life that we have. And I think it's also, for your stance, it's like, I think we now have to reflect on our friendships and the people that matter the most, and how we take care of the world around us. And also, like, now how do we, another lesson of like, how do we recreate safely outside? And it's just being more bear aware, I guess. But I do appreciate you sharing it. And I also think the Camp Make a Dream is a wonderful opportunity for people to donate to an organization. And I think it's a great way to contribute to the story as well. It's like, let's share and let's turn it into something that can be a little bit more positive.
Yeah, I think that's the overarching theme, is that people are good, and they've been really great to us. So we feel really lucky.
Well, thanks again, Matthew, and I look forward to going to check out your guys' new shop and in the near future.
For the inside scoop on the fly patterns we've discussed with our guest, check our blog for Flies of the February Room. If you would like to enter the February Room, shoot us an email at info@cdfishing.us. Also, remember to subscribe, share, and if we've earned it, give us those 5 stars. Thanks for dropping by, and remember to go fishing.